What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, shout out once again to the brother Magnetic Discovery with a donation to the channel via the PayPal, $15 donation. And he has a question. He says, I was talking to someone in your comments and they made all these claims on how Jordan had unfair amounts of help, played with so many Hall of Famers, and said LeBron barely had any help. Tim said LeBron only failed in the finals because he faced the Warriors and claimed Jordan's Bulls would never win a game against the Warriors, even if Jordan scored 35 and played perfect. And he said nobody in the Bulls was good enough to compete with the Warriors. Then I realized he had just said Jordan had too much unfair help, a complete contradiction. You can't have it both ways, but unfortunately, this is how LeBron fans like to argue. It makes me very upset because it's not a good sign for society. But I think some LeBron fans are starting to die off, but the remaining ones are desperate. Just wanted you to share your thoughts on how LeBron fans completely contradict themselves when it comes to Jordan's competition. Moving the goalposts is what they tend to do. That's why I don't really engage in debate with LeBron fans anymore, because I tend to want to talk from and debate from logic. And when I sense that you're just arguing just for argument's sake, and you're constantly shuffling and moving and pivoting just so you can win that particular talking point instead of winning the argument, even if what you just said totally contradict what you just stated 2 minutes ago, then at that point, it's really no point for you to argue. It's. I hate to say this, and please, women, don't get offended by that. But sometimes when you argue, when you're a man, one of the reasons why it's almost impossible to win an argument against a woman is because a woman will say something totally contradictory what she just said, because sometimes she's arguing from a place of emotion. While men, we tend to want to be logical. And that's not a knock on women. It's just our brains are just wired different. LeBron fans are wired differently from logical thinkers. Let me touch on something right quick. You know, this thing about the Warriors being unbeatable, right? The so-called unbeatable 2016 Warriors, right? If they were so unbeatable, why did they lose? Now, they did lose partly because of an injury to Andrew Bynum and that Game 5 suspension of Draymond Green, right? But let's not forget that the round prior to the finals, that same unbeatable Warriors team, with Draymond Green playing every game, with a healthy Andrew Bogut, we're down 3-1 to that Thunder team, who, by the way, I don't think any of us would call an all-time great team. But they were on the verge of losing to that team. So this notion that this Warriors team was totally unbeatable, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. And yeah, they do this all the time. They will downplay Michael Jordan by stating that, well, Scottie Pippen was better than Michael Jordan. But then if you're stating that, right, then aren't you basically suggesting that Scottie Pippen should be in the GOAT conversation? Aren't you doing that? If you're saying that Scottie Pippen was better than Michael Jordan, he was carrying Jordan, then you're putting him in the GOAT conversation. Therefore, he possibly is better than LeBron James. And like you said, they'll say that Jordan only won because he was on super teams, and that his era was garbage, and that he played against plumbers, right? He played against plumbers and firemen and all of that crap. But it's interesting that a 40-year-old Michael Jordan was playing against a New Jersey Nets team with Jason Kidd, the same team going to back-to-back finals, right? He was going up against that team with the number one rated defense in the league and was having 45-point games, 40-point games, 38-point games, right? With ease. Also, when you look at Ron Artest, right, aka Meta World Peace, when you look at his career, he was noted for being a guy that made it hard for scorers to score against him, right? Yet, the one guy who, if I remember correctly, had multiple 40-point games against Ron Artest was Wizards Michael Jordan. Even Kobe had to struggle a little bit to get off against Ron Artest. But Michael Jordan, cracked ribs and all against Ron Artest, if I remember correctly, had a couple of 40-point games. So even when you look at the fact that a Wizards Jordan with a torn meniscus and arthritic knee and had to have an orthopedic in his shoe and cracked ribs and just the age and attrition of being that age and being out of shape and getting out of shape. He just wasn't the same Michael Jordan, but yet that version of Jordan was able to drop multiple 40-point games against Meta World Peace, one of the premier defenders of his era. What do you think of prime Michael? Matter of fact, fuck that. What do you think a 1998 version of Jordan was done against Ron Artest? What do you think a prime 1990 version of Michael Jordan was done in the league with all these great players in the early 2000s? You know, when, you know what I'm saying, the style of play had changed, you know, with zone defenses. When they say Jordan would struggle with that, when in actuality, he still was scoring. He still was averaging 20 points, 23 points a game. And I know I'm going on a tangent here a little bit about Jordan, but one of the lies they love to tell, too, is that Wizards Jordan was awful, right? Well, the first year Michael Jordan came back, 2001-2002 season, he averaged 22.9 points per game. And I'm not going to sit here and act like he was the same Michael Jordan from the Chicago Bulls. He was not. But this is something that gets forgotten. Before that knee, that torn meniscus in his knee shut him down or severely altered his play, because he finished averaging 22.9 points per game. But at one point during the season, Jordan was averaging over 25 points per game. And at one point during the season, even though the Wizards finished 37-45, before he was shut down and the Wizards began losing like crazy, the Wizards were on pace, to win 50 games. And before he was shut down, or before the meniscus really started bothering him, there was a 10-game stretch, I think it was in February, when Jordan was averaging over 29 points a game, over 6 rebounds, and over 6 assists per game. Pretty much what he was averaging, a little bit better than what he was averaging his last year with the Chicago Bulls when he won his 5th and final MVP. And Michael Jordan, and I know this because I was watching all of those games, was actually in MVP conversation. And at that point, was actually even outplaying some of the stars of the league at that point in time, including Kobe Bryant, including Paul Pierce, on par with Tracy McGrady, on par with Allen Iverson, at age 38. That's not hyperbole. That's me actually watching those games and remember. That's why I laugh at some of these people, these podcasters who are just going regurgitated gobbledygook and you know faulty rhetoric, and they don't know what they're talking about. So anyway, that's what these LeBron James fans do, man. They put out a bunch of nonsense that's not based in fact, and when you call them out on it, they start moving around, moving the goalposts. They try to um, run away from the truth, and that works against maybe young people who don't really know much about the history of the game or don't know too much about what they're talking about. But when you have a seasoned debater, it's easy to debunk the nonsense that these people spew. You know. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. I mean, they lie all the time. The fact that someone can still fix their mouth to say LeBron's barely had any help when he has played with 20 players who at one point in their times, 20, 20 individual players who at one point in time in their careers were all stars. But I think 15 of them probably on their way to being Hall of Famers. Well, Michael Jordan has played with, I think, 7 players who, are at one point in time were all stars in their careers. 7 versus 19 for LeBron James. But somehow LeBron James always needs help every year. These are the facts. And no matter how much, you have a slickster, uh, you know, a snake oilsman, or whatever, as far as trying to sell you some bull, that's not the case. Anyway, tell me what you guys think.